Good morning and welcome to Clare College virtual tour of Clare College Gardens. It is a little bit unusual to our usual tour, but hopefully we'll still cram in all the information and you'll get a good look at what's going on behind the scenes with all the building works and of course our beautiful gardens. So I'm Kate Hargreaves, the head gardener here. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, I'm John Mears, I'm the deputy head gardener.
Hi there, I'm Griffiths. So I'd just like to say welcome, because normally we'd be starting a tour here in Old Court and we'd be explaining some of the background, but of course the other really important thing we want to get across is that we've got a fantastic new gardening team that are you're meeting. Well, you will have seen them working in the garden previously, but now you're going to meet, and now they're going to be leading the tour, and I'm really excited to hear about the insights that they're going to bring to their vision for the gardens going forward.
Okay, a little bit of background on the college in case you don't already know it. The college was founded in 1326. It was originally called University Hall. Very quickly fell into financial difficulties and was refounded in 1338 by a new benefactor who was the granddaughter of Elizabeth I, called Elizabeth de Clare or Elizabeth de Burgh. The college, where you're standing now, is on the western side of the old medieval range, which stretched all the way to Trinity Lane. The court that you see around you now is of a later construction, which began in 1638 and finished in 1719.
And in fact, we may be able to show you some of the foundations of the original Master's Lodge, which are currently being excavated in order to improve access to the Great Hall. Okay, so we can look down and see some of the foundations for the later range, but actually what the archaeologists have been uncovering are the location of the Master's Lodge, which originally ran laterally across what is now Old Court. And of course, some of you may remember that when we did some preliminary excavations in preparation for these building works, we uncovered elements of paths and foundations and the bay windows, which captured the outline of that original courtyard before it was moved west towards the river.
Yeah, in 1521 there was a fire in the college, and so there was quite considerable damage to the old medieval buildings, and over the next century it got very crowded and congested, and they eventually decided to demolish the old medieval core and start a new better building nearer towards the river. So in 1638 they started construction of that.
Fantastic.
So construction started on the new building in this corner here, on the western end, northwestern end, and then stretched around the southern end, and then stopped. And during the Civil War in the 1640s, and the building didn't restart again for another 20 years. And when it did, they then started constructing the northern side of it, and eventually leaving a big gap in the corner, which was then completed in 1719.
Fantastic. And we'll just mention the planting in here a little bit, as we are the gardening department. So the bay columns are essentially here to accentuate the height of the building, and any of the planting schemes that are put in are not meant to detract from the beautiful architecture that we have before us. In very recent times, because of the building works going on, it has been under scaffolding for just over a year, I think it was, so we're quite pleased that the bay columns managed to survive it, but you can see they are a little worse for wear. I'll give you a bit of a close-up on that. So we do have a rejuvenating schedule which we are going to put into full force and hopefully get them fighting fit again. And you can see that the planting along here is just classic herbage and Mediterranean style. So we've got sage, the curry plant, oregano, rosemary, lavenders, some thyme. They'll all fill out nicely, and hopefully our kitchens, our chefs, will use some of it. As we move from Old Court towards the bridge, you'll see our lovely Fagus sylvatica purpurea, copper beech to you and me. As gorgeous as it is very much the wrong specimen for the place it is planted. It's very much a parkland tree, as it's absolutely gigantic, and unfortunately covers the entire face of our beautiful building.
And of course there's an image from the Victorian times showing the tree modestly in proportion to when initially planted to the background of the college, but unfortunately it has really got a little bit beyond in terms of balance, although we're not allowed to even modify the understory with its current protected status.
And if we can do a close-up, it's not really going to show on the video very well, but there it is. Ooh.
Come on, let's see it.
There's actually a photograph.
And you can see that's from 1844. Right, into the scholars we shall venture. Lovely, serene river Cam. As we move into the Scholars Garden, you'll see that we've got a classic mixed herbaceous border. We have just about put our netting supports in. We still have some gaps to fill with some lovely cannas, dahlias, anything wonderful we've been growing in our nursery area. You can see it's a very mixed palette. It's a bit early in the season to have all the colours going, but you can imagine it's quite the riot. Actually, underneath this golden privet is an old well, so I'm told, and also the wall that you see is said to be the oldest wall in Cambridge, and of course the other side of this wall is King's College. It's on.
Right.
So you just want to mention the age of the oldest wall in Cambridge?
Yeah, so behind this is the survivor of the medieval college, and it is the medieval wall. The lower sections are dated from 1420, and the higher sections, obviously you can tell by the change in brick that it's a lot younger than that. But and next to that is our yew hedge, which started off as a renovation job and became a ploughed, pruned yew hedge, and now it is very much in a sort of an Art Deco style of shapes and.
So we do like to invite people to suggest what shapes they see in it, because everyone sees something different. And while we're here, we can just mention that we have planted up our bedding strips, so they will fill out and give us a beautiful show of colour through the summer season as well. You can see there's cannas and cosmos and all sorts of loveliness.
But Kate, as we come around the corner,
Yes.
we've got here one of the prime locations for a border, and yet it is, to be brutally honest, full of shrubs which are really a little bit grown out of their place. So what would you like to do between you? How would you like to redo, if you had the opportunity, would you redevelop this border, and what would you do with it?
Personally, I would quite like to see it turned into a grass border. I think it's absolutely prime location, south facing, super hot. The movement in it would just be spectacular, but keeping some of the fragrant shrubs that we have in there for winter interest, as it's a very well used thoroughfare. It's our main thoroughfare through the college, where people walk past that low wall down the avenue towards the bridge, so it would be a shame to lose all of that scent there. But I do know my colleague very much disagrees.
Well, I noticed how much attention it gets in the winter when we have some winter scented flowering, and everybody walks past it all the way through that season, and I think we should build on that. I think we should have more winter scented plants and extend into the summer, but still regain some of the movement that you would get in the grasses.
Exactly, so watch this space. I think there'll be more scented interest in here, interspliced with some wonderful patches of grasses. And we should mention, as everyone always asks, this shrub here, the Bupleurum fruticosum, is very much a point of interest, but it's such a beast, and you can see it always grows over the lawn and kills off the lawn. So unfortunately its days are numbered.
Can I just say, from a botanical perspective, it's interesting as well, because it's got an umbel shaped flower, but it's actually not in the umbellifery, or so quite intriguing.
It's also called, for some reason, hare's ears.
Okay.
For some reason, yeah.
Here we go, close up. Yes, unfortunately again it's a bit early in the season to see it flowering, but oh, there's something coming along there. But it does, the bees and everything do love it, I've got to say. Pollinators galore. You can see the dwarf lilac here, absolutely gorgeous. Just going over but still smelling wonderful.
Let's get to the cake. Before we leave the Scholars Garden, should we also draw attention to, you've done some rather cool pruning of, well, I don't know what pet names we might have for Tweedledum and whatever we might want to call them, but actually what you've uncovered partly is some quite interesting architectural features of the yew shrubs as they've grown around, but also you've got steps and some of the balls which presumably dates from the time of the building of the bridge.
Indeed they do, Howard. They have purposely put there as a feature to mirror the balls on the bridge, which we will go and look at in a moment. But yes, they've gone through various namings, and right now we're on Castor and Pollux.
Castor and Pollux, after the two Gemini twins of Greek and Roman mythology.
So when John and I first came here, this gap was wafer thin and you couldn't get anything through it, and now you can walk through it shoulder width, no worries. So we're chipping away at it bit by bit, and it will soon be accessible to the masses. Okay, onto the bridge. It's a lovely view of the bridge. The bridge was designed by Thomas Grumble in 1638. And unfortunately, as there was a flaw in the design and the college wasn't pleased with it, they didn't pay him all of his money. And the story goes, as a way to get back at the college, he snuck in at night and cut out a piece of stone from one of the balls for the amount of money that the college didn't pay him. Although it's quite likely it was just a repair that's fallen out. But everyone likes a good story, and I will show you said ball because all of the punt tours mention it as well.
So on the bridge, you may have walked past some interesting friezes on the bridge and wondering what they are. So we have some rocks, flowers and shells, got general sort of sea-like nautical motifs, and further along in the centre there are two quite interesting ones. We have on the left, we have Europa and her white boar, which is quite a racy story if you look it up. The boar represents Zeus, and on the other side we have a carving of Andromeda, who was saved by Perseus when she was being sacrificed to the Titan.
We have ventured down to our punt area on the River Cam because we thought it's worth a mention that in the Scholars Wall there you'll see lots of old pipes feeding out onto the Cam, and every year without fail we have some kingfishers nest in there, and they shoot and fly down these ditches to feed their young. And it's wonderful. Every year we see them, don't we, John?
It's a daily occurrence. It's a real hot spot for kingfishers. If you hear walking along the avenue and you hear a high-pitched piping noise, look towards the ditch in the river, you may see a kingfisher.
A quick flash of blue and orange.
Okay, and here you can see the current status of the new river cafe, which necessitated the installation of this Bailey Bridge, which has allowed us to bring in building materials, to erect the crane that is now going to be, we're well on with construction, and this is a really exciting part of the new buttery development, and will hugely improve the dining facilities for staff and students for the future. But unfortunately this has led to the disruption of the gardens, and which, as we'll see, has meant that effectively the lawn of the Fellows Garden has been taken up as a building site.
Okay, let's venture onwards. From the riverbank we move on to the yellow and blue border. You will get a slight peek at the building site and the areas that have been left to fallow due to said building site. But not to fear, we will get it back to its former glory.
So here's a prime example of one of our landmark prestige trees, which is a swamp cypress, Taxodium. You normally find these growing in the Everglades, and of course that's why it thrives in such a moist, damp environment, being so close to the river. And one of the interesting features of Taxodium is that it has negatively geotropic roots, which are roots which well, probably annoy the gardeners greatly because they grow up through the lawn. And here you can see a remnant just next to the building site of one of these roots, which is trying to come up. What those roots would normally allow is air channels to deliver oxygen and oxygenate the roots.
Under the yellow and blue we have a American buckeye, or Ohio buckeye, which produces some really beautiful autumn colour of red.
Yeah, Asculus glabra to you and I. It wasn't purposely planted here as best of our knowledge, but it was discovered when the gardens were cleared after the Second World War for their facelift, because as you can imagine, through the war years it was left to fend for itself. Just get some nice shots of these Iris Germanicas, Iris Sibericas.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's all just starting to come out now.
Kate, can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
This for me is one of my favourite times of the yellow and blue border, because it's primarily blue, and often later in the season it gets taken over by the great composites and Phyllictrum that you've got growing that are coming up at the moment. But at the moment we're really seeing some great blue, and I think you've also got a marvellous delphinium that comes up through as well.
Indeed.
So this border, and again I think we should just remind ourselves that Kate has just mentioned the restoration of the gardens that happened in the late 40s under the direction of the then fellow Professor Wilmer, and he of course was a neurobiologist who worked on vision and the origins of sight and vision, and he was also interested in how we perceive colours, and so that's the reason that we have these amazing borders. The yellow and blue were combined because Professor Wilmer wanted to capture the way that our eyes differentiate between yellow and blue as the day changes throughout the day. And so therefore, whilst we may see the yellow as being much more intense in full sunlight, by the time we get to later in the evening, it's the blue that's been accentuated. And in the same way, we would normally have two borders which would illustrate both red and orange, which are currently unfortunately sort of adjacent to the building site, and so they're not going to be planted up this year. But nonetheless, these ideas capture that basic research interest of Professor Wilmer, and of course also give us the background to the structure of the garden, whereby he was looking to create vistas and views and contrasting sections which would allow the visitor to have a very different experience as we move around the garden.
Excellent. And it's worth mentioning in the background there above Howard's Head you can see our Metasequoia glyptostroboides, which was...
It's easy for you to say that, Kate.
It's easy for me to say, but I'm well practiced in it. But it was gifted to the college in 1947, I believe, from seed from an original that was found in China because it was thought to be extinct, and then they came across it in its natural habitat, and a few plant explorers brought it back to Cambridge Botanic Gardens, I think it was.
I think there's three contemporaneous plants. There's one at Kew, and these are possibly older. The one in the Botanic Garden and the one here are possibly older. So it's as Kate's explained, it is a classic, sometimes loosely called a living fossil. I rather always object to that term because it's here today. It's survived for 200 million years. So yes, indeed, the leaf form and the cone form look exactly like fossils that we can find from 200 million years ago, but it's here and now. And the other interesting point about it, of course, is that as together with the taxodium, they're both deciduous conifers. So whereas most conifers tend to keep their leaves in winter, such as the yew and so on, here we have two conifers that shed their leaves.
Excellent. And we'll just do a close-up on our beautiful lupin that's flowering.
There we are.
Finish the shot.
So here we are in the pond garden, and you're now looking at the sunken garden. Professor Wilmer was inspired to create this garden when he visited Pompeii in 1926. Basically it's designed like an apse of a church. So the yew hedge forms the walls with a gateway in one end, and the inner sanctum is at the far end of the church, or the apse. And he also gives an illusion of height. So you walk down from the Fellows' lawn, and you descend down into the sunken garden, and then you ascend at the other end towards the inner sanctum of the apse of the church. This was mentioned in his very useful leaflet that he wrote.
Excellent. And just to point out that he also captured that sense of perspective, another thing that he was acutely aware of, by the planting of, well, I think they were originally junipers that were planted. We've now replaced them with these Irish yews, but again they focus towards and give a sense of extension.
It was
Sorry.
Also another factor for the design was the resemblance of a theatre. So we have our May players who use this area, and the three entrances at the far end of the apse of the church are ideal for coming in and out of the theatre, with people sitting at this end, at the far end, to watch.
Yes, so in an ordinary year, pre-pandemic, pre-building works, the May players come and they put on a Shakespeare play of their choice, and it works as an excellent theatre, and the public are actually invited in to come and watch this as well. It's not just the college societies, but we will have them again, just obviously while this building work's going on, things are a little bit different.
Just a couple of other points. I mean, I think Wilmer also noted he was surprised how well the yews, which John has mentioned forming the hedge, had survived what must have been a very wet winter. I'm guessing that was the winter of 1947, because of course there was intense snow and then long flooding at the end of when the winter eventually gave up. I wasn't quite around for the winter of 1947. But my father and brothers told me about it quite often. So that's one remarkable thing. The other important thing about yew, as you can see, is that I'm really pleased to see that Kate and John have actually started to trim back to sort of re-establish that boundary. And of course, with yew you can do that. You can cut back, as we did in the entranceway coming into the gardens a few years ago, and it very soon thickens up and grows back from old wood, which is a very great attribute of yew.
Indeed, and it's worth adding to that due to the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns and furloughing of staff, unfortunately we didn't get our usual winter hedge work completed before people were furloughed, so I managed to get some of the team back at the beginning of March, and John and I had to do a very quick job on trying to get some shape into this, and obviously doing that rejuvenating prune that Howard just mentioned. So you'll notice that some of it's got a very hard cut back and some of it's still shaggy, because well, we didn't need to reach that bit, but we did need to cut it back from the borders, which I'm about to show you, and of course do a hard prune on the sides here because it was encroaching on the lawn rather badly. And of course we've got a couple of years before students and their wider college will be able to use this garden once the building work's done, so of course it will be very lush and green by the time they come back. Just give you a look at this border. These iris are absolutely gorgeous. The not mermaid. The climbing rose on this side of the wall is yellow, and that's called mermaid, and we come across to Constant Spry. She's just coming into flower, as you can see, and her scent is absolutely wonderful. And whether or not you can see it on the film, it's absolutely covered in buds, and it will give such a wonderful display. It's such a great performer year after year, absolutely covered in these beautiful pink flowers. And of course the allium display is just coming to an end.
Just to, whilst you're here, and also picking up on the level of the pond, and mentioning when, in my memory, there has been a flood when the whole garden has flooded. I think that was shortly after I joined the college, 2003. That autumn we had the serious rains, and the sunken garden flooded up to the level of the wall there. But it wasn't so much that the water came in from the river. It's more that the groundwater table just rose up through, and in fact the pond itself is at the level of the river. So that's how the flooding occurred. It was the water came up through.
So I thought I'd take the opportunity to show you all the yellow and blue border in the afternoon sun, as it is just glorious. And why wouldn't you want to enjoy this? So we'll just take a stroll down the border, take it all in. Actually, it's a good opportunity to show the drip irrigation that we have to keep our borders as lush as they are. And you will notice there are some bare patches, and in an ordinary year we would fill those with various bedding that we've raised, or dahlias, or cannas, gingers, anything that takes our fancy, as long as it's the appropriate colour, to really fill out these borders. But as the building works are on and access isn't possible for you all, we're just leaving them bare. Thought it would be worth bringing you down the Stakeshed border, and you'll notice these roses we have along here. They're actually original from Neville Wilmer's design. Interestingly, this first one in the group is the canary bird, and then the rest down there are the Cantabrigensis. And believe it or not, we still have a specimen of the climber golden showers. It's a little worse for wear, but it is very old, but it does still produce a good amount of flowers. Wonderful. See, the Sephora Sun King has gone over now, but the structure against the wall is good. Hops is coming along nicely. That will fill those bamboo canes. And of course the Echium pininanas, we don't protect them in the winter. Actually, we just leave them to their own defences, and if they make it, they make it, and that one certainly has. So that'll put on a good flower and drop plenty of seed, no problems. Lovely, a lovely combination. Tomatoes just coming out. We'll move on into the pond garden again. The apple trees here are Lord Derby. I'm afraid I couldn't tell you how old they are, but you can see they're very gnarled. And they've seen better days, but they keep on going. And in fact, this whole garden was an orchard once upon a time, before it was redesigned with the Pompeii-inspired sunken pond there. I'll just take you for a walk around the pond top so you can enjoy all of these. There is a mix of alpine plants and any sort of dwarfing plant. So you'll notice there's plenty. Well, that's a little alpine alchemilla there. There's snow in summer. There's of course Armeria maritima. The Cicericium are a bit tall for this, but you know they actually add quite nice structure, so we allow it. Of course this alchemilla mollis will just go wherever it pleases. Albricia's going over. Lovely, all kinds of little sedums. Iberis. This is wonderful. And of course Constant Spry. Just ready to start bursting into flower, but not quite there. We'll move on through into the yard. Everyone always likes a little look behind the scenes. So yes, this is where the magic happens, as they say. So we've got an excellent nursery here with some raised beds that we put in a few years back, and you can see we've got a very good stock of Anchusa, the Loddon Royalist. Fantastic blue that is. Ordinarily they would have all been planted out when they were much smaller earlier on in the season down the yellow and blue to help fill those gaps that I pointed out to you. But as it happens, it's a display just for us right now. But again, they'll drop plenty of seed so we can keep stock for the future. Same with the digitalis there. Yeah. Coming to the cold frames, you'll see some of the bedding that we've raised for the pots and some border infills in the scholars, and anywhere we see fit really. Just nip into the greenhouse, and of course our lovely collection of the bananas, the Musa Baju, and of course the Ensetis aren't going to get their usual placement in the tropical garden this year on account of us being closed. Same with big cannas and gingers. The dahlias don't have their usual home in the riverbeds, but we're keeping some stock ticking along so that we've got plenty to pop in as and when the builders have gone and we get our gardens back. Our polytunnel, the fan's blowing. You can appreciate how hot these get. The Aeoniums love it. Yeah, it's worth saying actually, in weather like this we have to douse the floor and the walls so much to try and keep the humidity up because everything just wants to wilt. But yeah, and of course still some bedding and some perennials. We're just sort of in our standing area. Lovely sweet peas. Oh, divine. So there we go.
Yeah, so well that was interesting, John, because we just saw a grey wagtail down in the central garden and a little wren as we flew around the corner there. Now what else do we get here?
Oh, we have tree creepers, very common sight in the garden. It's like a little mouse crawling up the trunk of a tree. Some people mistake them for mice. We have nuthatches in the garden, gold crests, and in fact this is a haven for bird life, and most of them nest in the gardens every year. Although this year our blue tip boxes have been strangely quiet.
Well, you say that, but there's one above John's head there on this line. which I know has got chicks in because I can see it from my office door, and they're flying in and out, and I can hear the chicks.
All right.
Going for it. So anyway, so
Yeah,
do you want to say more about
we
this?
always have a great tit nesting in the eaves of the actual building, actually, near the ladder to the office. Every year we get it.
See, one just went in.
And then just to remind ourselves, we're standing at the bottom of what Wilmer identified as the tunnel of gloom. And of course one can't get the sense of perspective and view because in actual fact the path narrows as we get towards the base here. One thing that we were very active to do, as you can see, we've had to put a ramp in to allow access over the road that was put in. At the point that we were discussing where that road should be placed, we noticed that it was that the original plans were to actually take out what we consider to be some landmark trees, and I felt would have destroyed that whole sense of shade, and moved the driveway, persuaded them to move the driveway to the south, which actually protected these trees, which will keep that some sense of shade. In so doing, it was pointed out on a previous garden tour by a current postgraduate student, Antonia, that we were about to remove some boxwood, and boxwood is remarkably slow growing and beloved of those who engrave wood, and so I promised that we would rescue that wood. And if you're in attendance, there will be another feature which features the work that Antonia's been doing on the boxwood engravings, on endwood engravings, end grain engravings, to capture views of the college, and that's another presentation later in the gala week.
Fantastic. We'll take a little walk up the tunnel of gloom, as it's so affectionately named.
So from the bridge, I'm standing in front of the Grade 1 listed iron gates, which were built and installed in 1714. Moving along the avenue, and also down the avenue you'll see in the distance the famous stone piers of Clare College, which are on Queen's Road, and they're dated from 1690. Again, the ironwork is 1714. The land which became the Fellows' Lawn, Fellows' Garden, was acquired from King's College in 1638, which is the same year they started construction on the bridge. It was formerly called Butts Close and was at the time a meadow pasture land, very, very damp, flooded on a regular basis.
So they built up this avenue walkway.
Yes, the avenue. So the avenue was created in 1690, and by creating a raft of tree heads, and we think they were oaks, and it was then buttresses on either side by very ancient brick walls, which you can still see on the further side of the avenue.
And it's worth noting that in an ordinary year, without the building works and the pandemic, we would have cut down the remnants of our spring display on the avenue here. If anyone's familiar with Clare College, you may know that we have a beautiful display of daffodils and spring bulbs along here, and we ordinarily have to cut it down around this time of year to prep it and get it nice and low for the Mayball, because there's all sorts of food stalls and temporary toilet facilities and the like. So it's been wonderful to let it all just continue growing out into a temporary wildflower area, but again so beneficial to all the wildlife and helping with that biodiversity, which is so crucial. It's wonderful. And we come across Confucius tucked away there in the cornice mass, and here you can see the stone pillars John was talking about.
And walking towards Queen's Road, we have the stone tiers for the gates, which were built in 1690. The ironwork again, 1714. I'm now standing in front of the double helix, which is to celebrate the discovery of DNA. It ordinarily forms a focal point from the avenue between the two gates to the avenue. But as you see, sadly due to the furlough scheme and the COVID lockdown, it is in need of some TLC.
And of course, as with many of the colleges at the moment, we have put marquees and such on, and garden furniture on the lawns, which wouldn't normally be here, just so that the students have outside spaces to have supervisions and study areas. You know, it's very important right now as the pandemic is still very much happening. So we'll walk over to our newly established wild area and fill you in on that. So last year we got Barnes to put the scrape back from our already established wild area in the Fellows Garden along the edge of this memorial court lawn, and you can see it is establishing really rather well. There's corn chamomile, cornflowers coming out already, field poppies, some campion there.
Some field poppy.
It almost makes the Gladitia tricanthus trees seem like they're floating out of this the sea of white corn chamomile. It is wonderful.
Where do we find or rediscover our orchid escape?
Oh yes, and we're pleased to announce that the orchid plugs that we took out of our established wild area in the Fellows have started to show themselves.
Oh yes.
Here we go.
Isn't that beautiful? Just about the flower as well.
Fantastic. And they are dotted all along here. We'll try and find some more. So obviously it's come to the forefront now for everyone about how important biodiversity is. John, do you want to
Oh well, we certainly, around the college we're sort of establishing more longer grass areas, so we have quite extensive tree circles now, which we encourage wildflowers and spring bulbs to colonise, mainly the winter aconites and snowdrops, but this is our pride of joy. We're hoping that the yellow rattle that we had firmly established in the Fellows Garden will be re-established here as well.
But what a wonderful resource for all of the wildlife that relies on these to sustain themselves. We have just found another one of our and some yellow rattle.
Thank goodness.
Look at that. Fantastic. Wonderful. Couldn't have gone better. And here we are in Memorial Court, or approaching Memorial Court. This was an addition to the college circa 1930s, would we say? As there just wasn't enough accommodation, enough room for the growing college and all the students over in Old Court side. And as you can see, we've got a giant redwood, the Sequoia dendron gigantica, and our wingnut tree, the Pterocara fraxinifolia, and a very interesting specimen of pagoda tree, actually, the Sephora japonica pendula. But it's quite interesting because ordinarily it's always a grafted tree, and the graft is normally quite low, and on this tree it's actually quite high, so it gives it you know, a much higher structure and makes it a much more interesting specimen. But we will walk through the main archway into Memorial Court itself, where we have two large pines, and the court was built around the pines. So we've got Pinus nigra
Pinus sylvestris.
and Pinus sylvestris, that's correct, yeah.
I should say, just Kate, one of the first refurbishments I did with Steve when I first joined the Gardens Committee was to completely realign the borders around the edge of Memorial Court here, and you can see that this planting has really come to maturity now. We've got these wonderful cistus and a palm and so on. So
again, how would you say, was this 2005? ish.
Yes.
2005 it's got its refurb.
And it cleaned up the paths which were led to clay being traipsed into the room. So it was a huge step forward, both for the staff working in the college, but also managing, because there was also a lawn strip along the edge of the borders, which was frustrating to try and mow.
And of course, in the background behind Howard, we have the lovely fallen warrior, which is of course a Henry Moore. But we'll take a meander down so you can enjoy some of these beautiful cistus in full flower.
Cistus purpurea, purpurea.
Ooh, fantastic. Putting on their usual flower spikes as well. As we move through from Memorial Court into Ashby Court, this one, as Howard was just mentioning, was one of the last major overhauls done in 2013. And as you can see on this shady side, we have some geranium phaeum that's just going over. Some of the alliums are still holding quite nicely. Some daphnes. It's beautifully shaped box balls.
So just to pick up, Kate, the design. There was originally a betula that was in the middle of the lawn that was very much a favourite of the students to sit and revise under. And although it had a little bit outgrown its location, so as part of the redesign, we included 3 birch trees, contrasting birches, to try to recreate that sylvan feel for the lawn, but also in these introduce these seats and the cutaway paths, which gave an additional kind of quiet area for the students to sit and study.
Fantastic, yes. We'll just walk around the court actually and enjoy this.
Those roses are looking good.
The roses are just coming out. And of course we had planted 2 Acer Griseums as well, the paperbark maple. Looking fantastic. And obviously there's Sarcococca there, the winter flowering scented shrub. So there's interest all year round. Ah, just wonderful. Okay, we're just coming. So you can see now the planting's changed as we're on the sunnier side, so we've got Nepenthes, Achilleas, obviously all the irises on this side, the cistus in the background there, Santalinas, Salvias, just wonderful. And as you can see, students relax under said birches.
So one of the other features of the design when we instituted Lerner Court, which I think was 2008, 2009,
yeah,
was to include these cut-throughs to link together the 3 courts at the back of Memorial Court, which improved that sense of connectivity between the various courtyards. And so if we go through into and so here we are in what would be the newest of the courts, Lerner Court, together with the wonderful new facilities that we have for student study, lectures, and additional facilities and accommodation. Together with now this is a Sephora, I think.
Yeah, it is a Sephora, yeah.
But it wasn't looking very happy. It seems to have recovered somewhat.
Yes, I cut the dead out.
Yes, so on this side of Lerner Court we have shady planting, and we have nice viburnum, which produces lovely metallic berries in the autumn, We also have hydrangea arborescens Annabelle, which is beautiful big pom-pom white flowers. And next to that we have another hydrangea, different leaf, completely different leaf form, and it's called hydrangea quercifolia. It's a really beautiful plant. And we're moving around to the choice Aztec pearl, currently in flower, and a viburnum piccata, which we're trying to prune into layers. So we have like a wedding cake layered look to it, and that theme travels round the border into another one towards the exit and the other side of the fence as well to lead the eye.
Indeed.
On this side of the border, we're now facing the hot side of the border, the hot border, and we have a beautiful Cistus purpureum, and we have Stakeshed Lenata. We also have some beautiful lavender. Now this one's recovered really well. I thought it was on its way out. It's quite an old shrub, and we have some. I can't remember the new name of this one, but it's used to be called.
Oh, the Salvia yannii.
Oh, Salvia yannii. It used to be called Proschia.
Yeah.
Now it's called Salvia yannii.
Yeah. And the Akebia.
Akebia tenata. It's a chocolate vine. It's supposed to smell of chocolate, and it's very, very vigorous climber, which quite often tries to go inside of the building.
You might be able to see some remnants of it.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to prune it out. And the theme of hot tropical Mediterranean planting follows through with some Nepeta. I think it's probably Walker's Low. Another Cistus. I do know that one, but I can't quite recall. And we have a lovely early flowering Clematis Armandii.
We have two actually. We have another one on the wall over there.
And the tree that Kate will remember
The loquat.
Loquat. Areobotris.
Yeah, so it does actually produce edible fruits if it's in the right climate, and obviously being in Britain we are not, so but it's a wonderful structural plant, as you can see.
Areobotra japonica.
There we go, fantastic. And we've walked into Thirkill Court, and this got its refurb in 2005, and we put in these wonderful lilies called apricot fudge, which are just about to flower all along the sunny side to add a wonderful orange colour into it, because it's primarily purples and whites and foliage, and the pittosporums. Yes, the euphorbias overtake the borders, as you can imagine, and the cistus.
Cistus is a landanica. This one's not flowering just yet, we're just about to.
Plenty of
Nice
pots.
beautiful white flowers.
Again, see another good patch of the lilies. As we come round and into view is the Calocedrus decurrens.
Californian incense cedar, which forms a focal point down Thirkill Drive to Thirkill Court.
And of course the multi-stem birches are put in as beautiful focal points. The white stems there are fantastic. You know, a good feature in the winter as well. Yeah, so the Jack Monty eyes.
I think they are, yeah.
Yeah. And again onto the shady side, so plenty of beginas, hellebores, sarcococcus, the New Zealand windgrass, which self-sets everywhere. Some more hydrangea Annabelles just put in last year, so they will soon flank the archways and have the beautiful large white flowers that John mentioned earlier.
The Camerops Paris, Camerops humilis is flowering, which is quite unusual.
Yes.
Very sort of dinosaur and ancient looking plants.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the tour of Clare College Gardens, and we hope to see you again soon.